I drive for a living, have for almost 11 years now. Started with a cab company, moved to the app-based stuff when it took over, kept a few regular hours from the old days, who still call my personal number when they need a ride. I've had every kind of passenger you can imagine. Drunks, celebrities, people in the middle of the worst nights of their lives, people in the middle of the best. You develop a certain thickness after enough years. Things stop surprising you, honestly. I tell you all of that because I need you to understand that what happened on a Thursday night in late November was not something I could have prepared for. Not with 11 years of experience, not with anything. The pickup was a standard request through the app, a residential address in an older part of the city, the kind of neighborhood with wide, quiet streets and a big house set back from the road. I pulled up at the requested time, 9 p.m., and waited. She came out of the house slowly. An old woman, maybe 80, maybe older, small white hair, moving carefully down the front steps with one hand on the railing. No one helping her. She opened the door by herself, settled in with the deliberateness of someone who knows their body's limitations, and pulled the door closed. I asked her where she was headed. She gave me an address across town, a residential street I didn't immediately recognize, and then settled back in her seat and folded her hands in her lap and looked out the window. We drove in silence for a few minutes. I don't push conversation. Some people want to talk, some don't, and you learn to read it quickly. She seemed like a don't type, content to watch the city go by. No indication she wanted anything from me beyond the ride. Then she said, without turning from the window, "Your mother's name was Patricia." I looked in the rearview mirror. She was still looking out the window, expression unchanged, like she'd commented on the weather. I said carefully, "Sorry?" She said, "Patricia Ann. She passed away 4 years ago in March. You still have her rosary in your glove compartment. You don't know why you keep it since you stopped going to church in your 20s, but you can't make yourself take it out." I didn't say anything for a moment. I kept driving, kept my hands on the wheel, kept my eyes on the road, because I didn't trust what my face was doing. My mother's name was Patricia Ann. She died 4 years ago in March, and there was a rosary in my glove compartment that I hadn't touched in years and never mentioned to anyone, not a soul. I said, with as level as a voice I could manage, "How do you know that?" She turned from the window then and looked at me in the mirror for the first time. Her eyes were an unusual color, lighter than you'd expect, almost gray, the kind that seem like they're taking in more than they should. She said, "You don't have a brother, and you haven't spoken to him in 6 years. The falling out was over money, but it wasn't really about money. You know that, and so does he, and neither of you has been willing to say so." I felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature in the car. She wasn't done. "You were supposed to go to school for architecture. You had a gift for it. Your high school teacher told your parents that you were the best student he'd had in 30 years. You didn't go because your father got sick and someone needed to stay. You've never told anyone that. Not the girl you dated for 3 years, not your best friend, nobody. You keep it somewhere you don't look too often." I pulled the car over, not at the destination, just pulled it over. I didn't plan to do it. My hands did it before I decided to. I turned around in my seat and looked directly at her. She was watching me with the same unsettling, calm hands, like still folded, completely unbothered by the fact that I've stopped the car in the middle of the road. I said, "Who are you? How do you know any of that?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I knew your grandmother a long time ago, before your mother was born." She paused. She asked me to check on you. My grandmother died before I was born. I knew her only through photos and the occasional story my mother would tell. Quiet woman, private, not much given the talking to her about himself. I said, "My grandmother has been dead for 40 years. The old woman said, "I know. She wanted me to tell you something." I didn't want to ask. Every rational part of me didn't want to ask, and I didn't want to know. But I asked. She said, "She wanted you to know that your mother isn't alone where she is, and that the rosary in the glove compartment was your grandmother's before it was your mother's. Your mother never told you that because she didn't want you to feel the weight of it." I sat there in a pulled over car in a quiet street and couldn't speak for what felt like a very long time. I reached over and opened the glove compartment. The rosary was there, where it always was, small, dark beaded, tiny tarnished crucifix at the end. I'd always assumed it was my mother's. She's had it as long as I could remember. I drove the rest of the way to the destination without another word. When I pulled up, the old woman opened the door, climbed out with the same careful deliberateness she used getting in, and then paused with the door open and said, "Call your brother. It's been long enough." She closed the door and walked up the path to the house at the address she'd given, and I sat at the curb watching her go, completely unable to account for a single thing that had just happened. I looked up the address later that night. The house belonged to a woman who matched her description. She'd lived there for over 30 years. I found her obituary from 11 years earlier. I've driven that route 100 times since. I've never been able to explain it, never found a version of it that makes sense, and never told anyone the full story until now. The rosary is still in my glove compartment. I never took it out. And 3 weeks after the ride, I called my brother. This story doesn't have a clean ending. I want to say that up front because I think you deserve to know that going into it. It doesn't resolve the way you want it to. Some things just don't. About 3 years ago, I was visiting a city I didn't know well. A work trip, 2 nights, the kind of trip where you land, go directly to the hotel, attend meetings, and leave without really seeing much of the place. I was tired and underprepared, and when my evening meeting ran late and I needed to get back to my hotel, I just grabbed the first available cab from the rank outside the building rather than waiting for a rideshare. It was an older cab, not vintage, not charming, just old. The kind that's been in service for too many years, the interior worn down to the specific dullness of a thing that's been hard to use. The seat had a repair on it, patch of darker vinyl over a tear. The radio was on low, some talk station, the kind of sound that fills a space without contributing to it. The driver was a middle-aged man, heavy-set, said almost nothing beyond confirming the hotel name, which was fine. I didn't want to talk either. I was looking at my phone when I first noticed it. A smell. Not immediately alarming, not like anything I had a name for right away. Just not a good smell. An undertone beneath the pine air freshener. hanging from the mirror beneath the general smell of an old car. Something underneath all of that my brain flagged before I'd consciously processed what it was. I looked up from my phone. The front of the cab was normal. Dashboard, meter running, driver's hands on the wheel, radio going. Nothing wrong that I could really see. I looked down. The floor mat on my side was darker than the one on the other side, which was a standard black rubber you'd expect. I assumed it was just wear or water, or any of a dozen normal things that make surfaces dark in high-use vehicles. Then we went through an intersection, and the streetlight came through the window at a different angle, and the floor lit up for just a second, more than it had before. The dark on the floor wasn't uniform. It was a stain, specific in shape, not the spread of water or ground in dirt. It had an edge to it, a defined edge, the kind you get from something that pooled and dried. I shifted my feet. The smell got slightly stronger when I moved, that same underneath everything smell that I hadn't been able to name. I finally named it. I'd had a nosebleed once that bled so heavily, more than a nosebleed should, and it bled onto my bathroom floor before I got it under control. I remembered cleaning it up. I remembered the smell of it, and I remembered how a blood stain had that same specific shape when it dries. An edge that's darker than a center. Pooled quality. The stain on the floor of that cab had that same edge, that same shape. The smell underneath the pine and the old car smell was the smell of my bathroom floor 3 years before that. I sat very still for a moment and thought about what I was doing and where I was and what I actually knew versus what I was just inferring. But what I did know was that there was a stain on the floor and there was a smell. What I didn't know was really anything that had caused them. I took out my phone and took a photo of the floor. Not obviously, just angled my phone down while looking at my screen like I was reading something. Got a clear enough shot that the stain was visible. I watched the route for the rest of the ride. Correct route, no deviations. We pulled up to my hotel. I paid in cash because that's all he took. Got out and went inside. In my room, I looked at the photo. The stain was clearer than I expected. Dark, with that specific edge shape. On the far side of it, partially under the seat in front of mine, there was something I hadn't been able to see from where I was sitting. A small handprint, partial. The fingers of a right hand pressed flat, pointing towards the door, like someone trying to push themselves upright. I called the police immediately from my hotel room. I know how that sounds, calling the police because of a smell and a stain and one photo that I'd taken at a cab that night. The officer I spoke to was patient and professional and took the information. Cab number, which I noted from the door, physical description of the driver, the address I was picked up from, the time. He said that they'd look into it. I flew home the next morning. 2 weeks later, back in my own city, doing something completely unrelated, I had the news on in the background. A story out of the city I'd just visited. Cab driver arrested in connection with an investigation into the disappearance of 2 women over the previous 8 months. Cab number, which they mentioned in passing as a detail of the case, was a number I'd written on a hotel notepad and brought home with me without knowing why. I sat down on my couch and looked at that notepad for a very long time. I called the investigative tip line listed in the news report and gave them everything I had. The photo, the time, the pickup location, the name and number. Someone called me back 2 days later and asked me to email the photo directly to a detective handling the case. I never heard anything further after that. I don't know what role, if any, the photo played in whatever happened next. I don't know what the stain was, not officially or confirmed. But I only know that It looked like blood to me, and it smelled like blood to me, and the handprint pointed toward the worst. I do know that the cab number I wrote down on a hotel notepad matched the one on the news. I've taken exactly one cab since then, one, and I spent the entire ride with my feet flat on the seat beside me, and the window down despite the cold. When I got out, I stood on the curb for a long time before I went inside. Some things you just can't unlearn, and some smells you can't unsmell, and some rides stay with you long after the meter stops running. I want to start by saying I'd done everything right. I blocked him on every platform, changed my number, told my friends not to give him any information about where I was or what I was doing. I'd ended the relationship 8 months earlier and spent most of those 8 months looking over my shoulder in that low level, exhausting way you do when you know someone isn't ready to let go. Nothing dramatic had happened in a while. I'd started to breathe a little bit easier, and that was my mistake, thinking the quiet meant it was over. It was a Saturday night in early spring, a friend's birthday dinner, a restaurant downtown. The kind of night that runs longer than planned because everyone is having such a good time, and no one wants to be the first to leave. I stayed until almost midnight, which was later than I had initially intended, and by the time I said my goodbyes and stepped outside, the air was cold and the street was mostly empty. I ordered the ride home from the curb outside the restaurant. Standard process: confirmed the driver's name, confirmed the plate, watched the little car icon on my screen navigate toward me. While I waited, I did what I always do: checked my surroundings, looked up and down the street, noted who was nearby. Habit I really developed over the past 8 months without fully deciding to. The street looked clear. A couple walking a dog half a block down. A man in a jacket standing near the corner looking at his phone. Nobody I recognized, nobody paying attention to me. The car pulled up. I got in. The driver was friendly, asked how my night was. I gave the kind of vague, pleasant answer you give when you're tired and really just want to get home. I settled into the seat, put my bag on my lap, looked out the window as we walked away from the curb. We'd been driving maybe 4 minutes when my phone buzzed. A notification from an account I didn't recognize. A new one, not any of those ones I'd blocked. A fresh account created recently with no photos and no followers. It was a follow request. The profile was a gray silhouette. The username was a standard string of characters. I knew who it was before I even processed the thought fully. The way you know certain things, not because you reason them out, because your body just tells you first. My stomach dropped in that specific way it had learned to drop over the past 8 months. I declined the request and blocked the account and sat there for a moment with my phone in my lap, telling myself it was fine. It was just an account. It didn't mean anything was actually wrong right now at this moment. Then I thought about the man on the corner, standing near the corner looking at his phone, dark jacket, not walking anywhere, not waiting for anyone, just standing there with his phone in his hand. I pulled up the rides route on my app to give myself something to focus on. We were about halfway to my apartment, moving through a stretch of the city I knew well. Everything normal. I looked at the route and thought about my apartment. Ground floor. Windows that faced a street. A door with a good lock, but a hallway with neighbors I didn't know well. I typed a different address into the app. My friend Kara's place. 10 minutes in a different location. Someone I trusted, someone who had a spare key and a couch, who would open the door at midnight without asking questions first. I updated the drop-off and the driver confirmed the new address without comment. I texted Kara, "Can I please come over? I'll explain when I get there." She replied within a minute, "Doors unlocked, come straight up." I spent the rest of the ride watching out the back window. Nothing consistent behind us, different cars at different intervals. Nobody appeared to be following us. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I told myself the account request was just a coincidence. I told myself a lot of things. We pulled up to Kara's building. I think the driver got out and stood on the sidewalk watching the car pull away before I moved toward the entrance. That's when I saw him. He was across the street, standing in the shadow of a building entrance, particularly obscured, the way someone stands when they don't want to be seen, but also haven't fully committed to hiding. Dark jacket, the same build, particular way his shoulders played that I'd known because I spent 2 years memorizing them without meaning. He was looking at the car I'd just gotten out of, not at me yet, the car, watching it pull away, deliberately. I didn't freeze. I want to be clear about that because I think people assume you freeze, and I didn't. Something in me went very quiet and focused in the way it does when the thing you've been half expecting for months finally stops being hypothetical. I stepped sideways toward the entrance of the building, into the shadow of the doorway, out of the pool of light from the street lamp. Slow moment, no sudden motion, nothing to catch peripheral vision. I pressed myself against the door and watched him through the narrow gap between the door frame and the overhang. He was still looking at where the car had been. His head turned slowly, scanning the sidewalk in the direction the car had come from. He hadn't seen me move. He was looking at the top of the drop-off point, not 10 feet to the left of it. I texted Kara without looking down at my phone, keeping my eyes on him. "Buzz me in right now, don't ask." The door clicked. I pushed through it slowly, slowly enough not to make the sound of the door swinging, not to create movement visible from across the street. I caught it behind me before it latched. I moved the interior stairwell immediately away from the lobby windows and went up the stairs to Kara's floor, without using the elevator because the elevator had a light inside it, and the lobby camera above it would have required me to stand in view of the front window to call it. Kara met me in the hallway, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without saying a word. I sat on her couch and told her everything. The account requested in the car, the man on the corner at the restaurant, the figure across the street. She listened to all of it, and then she picked up her phone and called her boyfriend, who was a large person and a light sleeper, and asked him to come over, and he was in there within just 30 minutes. Called the police from Kara's apartment, filed a report, added it to the existing documentation I'd been keeping. Dates, incidents, screenshots, the kind of paper trail you build when you know you might need it eventually, even though you hope you don't. This all went into the file. They took a report, noted the location, and said they'd increase patrols in the area. I didn't go home that night. Slept on Kara's couch with her boyfriend's truck, parked directly outside the building, and my phone charged to full, and my shoes still on. In the morning, in daylight, with coffee and Kara at the kitchen table, I made a list of every accommodation I'd been making without admitting I was making them. Routes I didn't take anymore, the times I avoided going out alone, the way I positioned myself in public places so my back was never fully to a room, the mental inventory I ran every time I left somewhere, who was nearby, what they were doing, whether any of them had been there in the last time I was there. I'd been doing all of it for months, and I'd been telling myself I was being careful, rather than just admitting I was afraid. I got a restraining order the following week, not because I thought a piece of paper would stop someone determined enough to create new accounts and stand on street corners in the dark, but because I wanted it on record. I wanted the next officer who took a report to have context. I wanted there to be a documented legal line so that when it was crossed, and I believe it would be crossed again, there was already a structure around it. The process was so much harder than I thought it would have been. Documentation, explaining, more moments of feeling like I was the one who had to prove something, but I got it. Things quieted down again, whether because of the order, or because of something else, or because the quiet was just quiet again. I couldn't say. I changed apartments a few months later. New building, higher floors, different part of the city, new routines, new routes, new patterns. I still look at the corner when I get out of a car at night, and I still check who's standing on a still street where everyone else is moving. I note the man in a dark jacket who isn't walking anymore. Not because I'm afraid anymore, not exactly that, but because I learned the hard way that the quiet doesn't mean it's over. It just means you haven't seen them yet. I want to be upfront about something before I tell this story. For a long time after it happened, I questioned my own memory of it. I went over every detail, looking for the places where I'd maybe misread something, overreacted, filled in gaps that weren't there with something darker than reality warranted. I did that because it felt safer than accepting what I actually experienced. I don't do that anymore. I know what happened. I was 26 years old, new to the city, still figuring out which neighborhoods connected to which, relying on apps to get anywhere after dark. It was a Friday night, not particularly late, maybe 11:30. I was coming home from dinner with coworkers, slightly tired, ready to be back in my apartment. The car that showed up matched the app. Right make, right color, plate confirmed. The driver looked young, maybe mid-20s, with one of those dashboard phone mounts and an air freshener hanging from the rear view. Normal setup, nothing out of place. I got in, confirmed my address, and we pulled away. The first minutes were completely fine. We didn't talk much, which suited me. I watched the route on my phone, the little arrow moving through familiar streets, and felt the particular relaxation of a night winding down in a warm car. We stopped at a red light about 8 minutes into the ride. I heard a click. Soft, almost inaudible, but distinct. I looked at the door. The lock had moved, from unlocked to locked. I could see the small button depressed where moments ago it hadn't been. I reached for it immediately and pressed it back up. The light changed. We moved forward. 30 seconds later, click. Locked again. I looked up at the driver in the rear view. He was looking at the road. Expression neutral, nothing in his posture that suggested he'd done anything at all. I unlocked my door again, shifted slightly toward it, started paying careful attention to the route on my phone, which I noticed now we were off of it. Not dramatically, not a U-turn or highway entrance, just a quiet drift away from where we should have been. The kind that sometimes happens gradually enough that you might not catch it if you weren't watching closely. A right turn that should have been left. Then a street I didn't recognize running parallel to where we should have been. but distinctly not where we should have been. I said, keeping my voice completely even, "I think we missed a turn back there." He said, "Shortcut." "My app is showing we're off route," I said. "Can you please follow the GPS?" He said, "My way is faster." I looked out the window. We were in a part of the city I didn't recognize, darker than the area we'd started in, fewer people on the street. The blocks were longer, more industrial, kind of area that's busy during the day and empty at night. I opened my phone and switched to a different app, started a location share with my roommate, sent it without a message first, just the pin, and then texted her one word, "tracking." She replied within 30 seconds, "On it." Then I did something I'd read about once and filed away and never thought I'd actually need. I called out our location out loud, clearly, like I was just noting it for someone on the phone. I said to my phone, "Yeah, I'm on the corner of," I looked at the nearest street sign, "Alfred and 22nd, heading south. Should be home in about 10. He didn't say anything, but his eyes moved to the rearview mirror and found mine. I held the look. He took the next left, and the one after that. Within 4 minutes, we were back on the route my app showed, moving toward my address, deviation correcting itself by block. He didn't say another word the entire rest of the ride. Pulled up to my building, stopped the car. I opened the door, unlocked this time, he hadn't touched it, and got out without looking back. I stood on my building steps until the car was gone. Inside, I reported the ride through the app in detail, the logs, the route deviation, the specific streets. I screenshotted the route comparison, what it should have been versus what it was, and attached it. The company's response was automated, an acknowledgement, a reference number, a note that they take safety seriously. I never heard anything specific about what happened with the driver. What I know is this: the locks on the car can be controlled from the driver's door, both at once. He locked mine twice, and both times I unlocked it, within seconds, and he didn't push it further. Whether that mattered, whether that small act of immediately pushing back changed his read of the situation, I don't know, and I can't know. What I know is that I got home. I take ride shares differently now. I sit behind the passenger seat, not behind the driver. Harder angle for them to watch you and easier for you to watch them. I confirm the route before we move. I share location before the car starts. And if I hear a click of the doors locking, I don't wait to hear it twice.